This is the IDP After Show.
Hello and welcome to the IDP After Show. I am your host, Jeff Pomazal. With the dust just settling on the NFL Combine this last weekend and the NFL Draft with just a little over 50 days away, there couldn't be a better time to do a little IDP mock drafting and to start thinking about and planning for your upcoming Dynasty League drafts. To help me with some of the more intriguing and relevant players to be aware of this draft season, I had the great privilege of drafting alongside the wonderful, the amazing Jason King. Jason, thank you for taking some time to being here with us tonight and talking about some of these NFL prospects.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. Looking forward to it. So just a little background about our draft tonight. We're going to be using the Big Three scoring for the basis of our scoring system. There isn't going to be a defensive tackle required or a premium league, nor is it going to be a league that breaks down the defensive backs into corners and safeties. But you very well could hear some of those names pop up through our 2 rounds. Jason and I will be drafting back and forth and occasionally breaking down the rationale for each pick. We'll be drafting more like real NFL GMs than fantasy managers during this podcast, as we'll be basing our picks on college tape, numbers, and combine performances, as these players obviously haven't been drafted on real NFL teams yet. And for those of you that have played IDP leagues, I don't have to tell you that IDP landing spot is crucial for performance, more so than their offensive counterparts. Before we get started with our IDP mock, Jason, in your opinion, did any players improve their draft stock this past weekend at the Combine?
Yeah, for sure. I wrote down a couple of guys that I really thought I wanted to mention on here. First of which, day one, Braden Fisk, defensive tackle out of Florida State. 6'0", 292. He's got 31-inch arms, so kind of T-Rex arms, but just elite speed, elite explosion. People were popping Aaron Donald and Geno Atkins RES cards next to Fisk's. Kind of crazy. But, that 33.5-inch vertical for a 292-pounder, that was something. Had a 4.78 40, 1.68 second, 10-yard split. That's kind of a wild number for a man his size. So 9.92 RAS. He really helped his stock. He made himself some money. I think he'll probably end up in the second round of the draft after that showing. And then Cole Bishop, safety out of Utah, 6'2", 206. He's got shorter arms, unfortunately, like not quite 30-inch arms, but tested out as a great athlete. He had a 4.45 40 with a 1.56 10-yard split. Good jumps, including a 39-inch vertical, 9.82 RAS. So, he's a guy, versatile athlete, ability to play deep, close to the line of scrimmage, really good coverage ability. I thought what he did and the workouts really helped his stock.
Jason, when you look at like the performances at these combines, like clearly these players are like, this is my chance to really show off. And do you think there's any reason like these players from like smaller schools or smaller programs that maybe the average fantasy football manager or even college football fan maybe doesn't get a chance to hear, but all of a sudden these guys pop off and we see like their draft stock elevated so much on these draft weekends?
Yeah, it is a good chance to see some of these guys that you don't get a chance to check out on Saturdays during the season. For one, you really get a chance to see them side by side next to some of the guys you are used to seeing. So it kind of gives you that perspective. And then it's also kind of nice just to get to hear kind of their stories of, where they've been, where they've come from. The interview process is fun too, just to get to know a little bit about players because you do end up rooting for them. When the draft rolls around, and it does make it a little bit extra fun for fantasy when you get guys on your team that you actually like and want to pull for.
Right. And we kind of joked a little bit earlier too about how some of these players obviously help them with their on-field performance, and even like you said, like the interview process is really important because general managers and head coaches want guys who are coachable, who have a good head on their shoulders and are going to be like strong locker room guys. There was a lot of buzz going around during the combine about a bunch of players who believed like in flat earth and all of that kind of stuff. Do you think that some of those, like, I know it's kind of tongue in cheek, but do you think some of the general managers or head coaches look at some of these players and be like, yeah, sorry, buddy, we're going to remove your sticker off the board?
I hope they wouldn't do that for somebody that just happens to be a flat earther. But I would imagine that some of the stuff that comes out in the interview rooms that we don't get to see, that'll get them knocked off the board. Not so sure about some of the conspiracy theorists out there and how much that hurts them. But there was some pretty interesting stuff to come out of those interviews.
Definitely was. Well, Jason, before we get started with our IDP mock draft here tonight, just kind of be thinking about drafting players based on how we would see them, how we want them on our fantasy teams. If they're players that are going to be relevant for scoring, not only just in real NFL football, but also for our fantasy needs. So with that said, you won the coin toss and you are the first to draft.
All right. Well, I'm going to go a little bit against the grain here. I'll warn you about that. But I will go with Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker out of Texas A&M. Just to talk a little bit about him. So I'm a sucker for guys who make plays in the backfield. Cooper had 17 TFLs last year, 30 and a half over his career. He's got good size, 6'2", 230. He's got nice, long 34-inch arms, elite speed, around a 4.51 40 at 1.54 in the 10-yard split. He really quickly gets up to speed. He's a problem off the edge or as a blitzer. I would say with that speed and smooth turns, he can run with guys up the seam in coverage, and you hope that length will kind of help him get back in zone drops and keeping passes from going over his head. I've seen him; he looks a little bit clunky in his back pedal, so he's got some to work on there. He's kind of high cut. If you look at him, I guess you could call him kind of leggy. So I do worry a little bit about him in the run support. But he had the production in college with an 84 tackle senior year. Not a big hitter. He kind of gets the ball carriers, and then he makes sure he centers them up, but then he just kind of like twists them down, I guess I would say. So not a big hitter. Hopefully that play style will help him, stay healthy. But it could mean that he has a higher ratio of assists to solo tackles, as teammates may have time to get over there and help him clean it up once he gets that initial stop. But I've seen him do a good job stacking and shedding blockers when engaged. So he can do that. He can avoid blockers altogether. I think he gets downhill really quick. If he's in open space, he's chasing down a quarterback. We saw him do that against Jalen Milroe in the Alabama game. So that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, you mentioned his sacks. He had 8 last season, in 12 games. So that's pretty good production. He had a 90.8 overall PFF score, the highest of all linebackers last season. So definitely a player to consider at the 1.1 there. So in your IDP drafts, I'm gonna kick off the defensive end run here sooner than later, I think, and I'm gonna go ahead and draft Dallas Turner, defensive end from Alabama. Turner's making a case for probably the first defensive player being drafted in the real NFL draft later on. So I just think he's got all of the tools. A lot of comparisons to last year's number 1 defensive player, Will Anderson, that was taken. So I think that, there's a lot of similarities between their game. He played 14 games this last season. He had 53 tackles, 14 and a half for a loss to go along with 10 sacks. And like you said, that Edgerrin Cooper has a lot of speed. Dallas Cooper, for being 6'2", 247, had a 4.4, 640. So that's kind of booking as well. So I would love to see him on a team maybe like in Atlanta. If he falls maybe to Chicago, somewhere in there, that would be ideal for him to be taking that draft stock, high profile player. I think that would be an ideal situation for him. So I'm going to make him my first pick, the number 2 overall.
Yeah, that's a good call. Just turned 21. He's young. Just turned 21. But yeah, big time combine winner there. All right, 3. So I'm going to stick with linebacker, and I'm going to take Peyton Wilson out of NC State. So you see me wearing red tonight, and all transparency, I'm an NC State alumni and season ticket holder. So I've seen a lot of Peyton Wilson over the years. I've been a big fan of his. He's almost 6'4", 233, so he's got adequate size. A little bit shorter arms at 30 and a half. But if you watch the combine, he made waves. He had a 4.4 340. And I would say that really wasn't a surprise. If you've watched him, he's got great sideline to sideline speed. We knew he was fast. But there's a lot more to love about him. He's a high effort guy. He's a team leader. The medical history is what could hold him back a little bit. I know he had 2 major knee surgeries. He's had surgeries on both shoulders. I heard someone say that he's had up to 10 surgeries since he started playing football. So that's a lot to come back from, but he did it. He's come back. He played the best football of his career in 2023. He's a good tackler in big play leagues. He's a really effective blitzer. Works his way through the bodies to get to the quarterback. He can line up on the edge and pass rush on occasion. Pretty smooth in coverage. He can turn and run a man. Does a good job of dropping well in zone. Does a good job of reading quarterback size. He can make plays in coverage. So, I'm a fan. I love the guy. If not for the injury history, it wouldn't surprise me if he made kind of a Jack Campbell leap up into the back half of the first round. Probably not going to happen. But he's that kind of athlete.
Well, like you mentioned before too, about like rooting for some of these players when you know their backstory and stuff like that. And I think Wilson is like a prime example of that, a guy who has overcome, a lot of adversity. I know they make a lot about the two torn ACLs and all of the way he made his way back, but to rack up 138 tackles this season, that's pretty outstanding, in 12 games. And he did so while still having a PFF score as 89.6, which is just a tick underneath the overall leader, Edgerrin Cooper. So to be involved in that many plays and still be rated that high, that's pretty impressive. So can't fault you for taking Peyton Wilson there at number 3. I'm gonna, yeah, there you go. Sticking with my defensive end love, I'd be very happy if this actually happened. I'm going to go ahead and take Jared Verse, number 4, out of the defensive end out of Florida State. There's really not a lot to say about this pick. 13 games, he had 41 tackles. He had 12 and a half tackles for loss. He had 9 sacks. Another guy that has amazing speed, just under 4.6 40, at 253 pounds. That's hauling. That's a big dude coming at you. Here again, I think he's a player that if he lands in an ideal spot, again, like in Atlanta, a Chicago, somewhere that's really needing, maybe even like a Minnesota, we have no idea what's going to happen with Neil Hunter and free agency. I think he could be a day one plug and play player for you on your team. So pretty easy layup for me there at number 4. So
yeah, that's a good pick. That is a violent man. All right. Coming back at 5. So I'm going to go with Leatu. 6'4.5", 259, 32.5 inch arms. That's good. He's got elite speed. He's not explosive like Dallas Turner or somebody I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit, Chop Robinson. That showed in his jumps. They were good, but they weren't like elite level. But his hands, the way he uses his hands, his moves, they're really kind of second to none in the class. He's got a swim move that makes a lot of tackles look bad. And he gets into the backfield at a good clip. Had 26 TFLs this year. He's been a pressure monster. He's had 63 pressures in 2023, according to PFF. Stout against the run. And then I keep going with these guys with the medical issues, but yeah, he's got a red flag, of course, dates back to when he was at Washington. And I think the school actually forced him to medically retire. And he sat out a couple of years with spinal injury. Now, not as bad as it sounds. He's got 2 full seasons under him since then. And, I think most people are familiar with Jalen Phillips, who also had to retire due to concussions. And he's, one of the better IDP assets out there now.
Yeah, unfortunately, he just suffered an injury as well, at the end of last season. I had a story that Latu had gone on a visit his junior season and when Phillips was there, but Phillips had finished his season and had already went on to start training for the combine and stuff like that. So he wasn't actually there when they visited, but it's so ironic that their stories are so similar. And when Washington medically redshirted Latu and said that he was pretty much done, like you said, he was off for 2 years, and then he went and visited a doctor in LA, and they kind of medically cleared him. So it'll be interesting to see which medical staffs in the NFL maybe throw a red flag up on some of these guys. Maybe like a guy like Wilson, they kind of like, he's got a lot of grind on his knees, and those tendons are a little weak. Maybe we're going to shy away from him, so they maybe move him on a board. And another team will be like, nope, we're gonna ride him for 3-4 seasons, and so it'll just be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yep, just takes one team.
That's right. All right. Hopefully he was still gonna be there for me, but obviously those are some fantastic picks, 1 through 5. I'm gonna stick with the defensive end train. I guess I'm just a sucker for these guys. I'm gonna take Darius Robinson, defensive end out of Missouri. Again, like a lot of these other guys, these guys are high motor guys, very explosive. Robinson had an amazing Senior Bowl, really put his name on the map, followed it up with a decent combine, a little bit slower, almost just a clip under 5, but you're not having these guys on the field covering wide receivers and stuff like that. Their job is to make havoc up the middle. So pretty explosive, 35-inch vertical for a guy that's just under 300 pounds. So yeah, Darius Robinson, I think at this point in the draft would probably be a pretty solid go.
Yeah, he's a big dude. Kind of thought about like Denico Autry type of player, where he can line up over the tackle, go outside, play 5, play a little 4-eye. Got a lot of versatility with him.
So Jason, I'm gonna stop just for the draft for just a moment here and just kind of think about so in the real NFL, players that are dual eligible or can play multiple positions, like a Darius Robinson, where you can kick him inside, play a little tackle, you can kick him outside, play a little defensive end. Obviously, that's a valuable thing on an NFL team. Do you find value in that as far as a fantasy football team goes?
I think he can hurt, depending on how much head up over the tackle he's playing. So if he's been asked to 2-gap a lot, I think that can hurt for sure. Personally, I see Robinson as probably playing a little more 5 than head up over the tackle. Which probably supports where you're drafting Matt here. So, but yeah, for sure, if anybody that's having the 2-gap playing head up over a guard or over a tackle, that's going to traditionally slow, I guess, their output.
So you see that position kind of being more of like a space eater, taking on double teams and freeing up like linebackers behind them and things like that more so.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for my question or my answer to my question. So, all right, we'll resume the draft. As Wayne said, draft on. Maybe you didn't say that, but.
All right. So I'm up at, this is pick number 7. So going back to the linebacker well, and I will take Junior Colson out of Michigan. Pretty big linebacker, 6'2", 238. He's got nice 32.5-inch arms. I hate that he didn't do any drills at the combine, but if you remember in the playoffs, he was running around out there with a club on one of his hands, so probably pretty beat up. I can't say I blame him for using the extra time to recuperate before the draft. We mentioned Turner and just how young he is. Like Colson's young too. He's 21. So if you compare that to Peyton Wilson, who's going to be turning 24 during his rookie season, that's a pretty big difference in age. I think some of the things I like about Colson is he's physical. He works through traffic well. He can explode downhill, but he also does a good job, I think, of playing under control. I would say if I'm nitpicking, one thing I don't like about Colson is he's kind of a high tackler. So Cooper does a good job of centering guys, making sure he's wrapping them up midsection. Colson comes in and he really tries to wrap up around the shoulder pads. So I would say if that can't get coached out of him, I would say he could potentially have a high missed tackle rate. at the next level. But I'm nitpicking a little bit. He's okay in coverage, I think. He's better, I think, kind of turning and running with guys. I don't think he's all too comfortable yet, kind of backpedaling into zone coverage. But I don't think he's terrible at it, but definitely better attacking downhill.
And like you said, like with the missed time because of injuries and stuff like that, we have to remember Michigan played 3 more games than a lot of these other teams did. So, when we say about a college kid playing 15 games, well, that's not even an NFL season, but compared to their peers where they're playing 12 games a season, that's like 20% more of their season that they're playing. And that's a lot of wear and tear on a 20, 21-year-old body. So,
yeah. Well, he got a natty, so he's good.
You're right. Yep. Yeah, there's not too many college guys that can say that. So
that's right.
Definitely. Well, I'm going to take a linebacker here so you don't get them all. I'm going to take a guy who's preseason in the college was kind of highly thought of as maybe one of the elite linebackers in the draft, and kind of played very well this season and kind of still right there. I'm going to go with Jeremiah Trotter Jr. out of Clemson. Obviously, if you're playing fantasy football for a long time or a fan of the NFL, his dad played in the NFL, so he's got that pedigree for him. He's been around the game his entire life. Played at a big program in Clemson, 6 foot, 230, so he's got the build for it. Played 12 games this last season, 88 tackles and 5.5 sacks. So he can kind of do a little bit of everything. He can cover. He had really good coverage skills. He improved every season that he was at Clemson. His run defense improved every season, according to PFF. So we have an ascending player who's got the pedigree of the NFL, and he's got the general knoweth of being around the NFL already as a young man. So I'm going to go ahead and get a steal right there at number 8 with Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
Yeah, you may have gotten a steal there. His bloodlines never hurt. Okay, well, I can't let you have all the edges either. So I'm gonna come back around and take a guy that a lot of people were excited to watch work out. So that's going to be Chop Robinson, edge out of Penn State. Not a huge guy, 6'2.5", 254. Did have pretty good long arms, 32.5-inch arms. But yeah, 4'4", 940, 154 10-yard split. That's pretty elite speed. Did the jumps. He was pretty good there too. But if you've watched him, he's really quick off the snap. He times snaps well. Doesn't have awesome power, but I think he's good enough. He can transfer speed to power, get that bull rush. Of course, the concerning thing with him is, for all that speed, just 26 pressures in 2023 at Penn State, only 11.5 sacks over 3 seasons. So not a lot of production. I don't think he's a finished product yet either. So I'll take Chop and probably stick him on a taxi squad for a year and see if he pans out.
And I think that's a great thing to kind of mention here too, Jason, as you look at some of these players, and we're getting towards the end of the first half of the draft here, and you might see some players that are coming up that will be immediately put into your lineup, but there's also players that you want to sit on and develop and things like that on your dynasty squad. So, and Chop Robinson totally fits that bill. Has all the tools, just hasn't been very consistent yet, and so maybe get him in the NFL weight room, get him in the NFL program, kind of puts all those things together. So cannot blame you at pick number 9 there with that one. I'm going to go off a little script here now. We've been taking a lot of linebackers and defensive end. I'm going to take our first secondary piece, and I'm going to go ahead and draft Cooper DeJean out of Iowa. He's kind of it'll be an anomaly until the draft to see kind of exactly where he's playing. We know that he can play everywhere in the secondary. I think he would be criminally underrated if he didn't get a chance to play corner in the NFL, just because he has elite corner skills. Would love to see him maybe in a slot role, just because playing really close to the line of scrimmage where he can use his physicality and his tackling. A caveat with him is he returns a lot of kicks. So if you're in a league that rewards for kick return yards, he's possibly kind of a little bit of a cheat code as far as that goes. So at pick number 10, if I'm getting a guy who I can get points out of for tackles and defensive stops, but also maybe as a defensive or a return league specialist, sign me up. So.
Yeah, you can't argue with his ball skills. And yeah, he's a good blitzer too. It's a good pick there. All right, let's see. We are at pick 11, and I know this is not a DT required league, but I really like this guy as a DL anyway. So I'm going to go with Byron Murphy out of Texas. Not the tallest guy, 6 foot, 297. Just elite speed for a tackle. His vertical and broad jumps were both great and pretty exemplary of that lower body explosion that you see on game day. But just a really seriously strong guy, really, really quick. He can disengage. He can scrape down the line to get the running backs. When he's playing 3-tech, you're not going to run in his gap. You're not getting by him. I saw one play where he lined up outside the tackle and he came back in and beat him inside after he set him up. There's length concerns, obviously, but he's a high-level tackle, and his movement is just elite for a 3-tech. I mean, he explodes off the line at the snap. So I'm going to go with first DT off the board with Byron Murphy.
Yeah, like you said, for him to be just close to 300 pounds and to move the way he does, like that shouldn't be possible. Like it's not physically, scientifically possible that he does that. So, well, I appreciate you taking the defensive tackle for me, so I don't have to take one now. But I'm going to take another defensive end project, I think, right now at the number 12 pick. I'm going to go ahead and select Chris Braswell, defensive end out of Alabama. Kind of similar to Robinson, that he's got a lot of great measurables. He's got a lot of the tools. I just think it hasn't been more. He hasn't got a lot of opportunity at Alabama to really showcase his talents. He's playing behind some pretty elite talent. Last year we had Will Anderson. This year we already had Dallas Turner, his teammate, get drafted. So he's kind of like one of those, like on any other team, he probably could be the guy, but he just happens to be playing on a team that's just continues to roll out NFL talent year after year. So I think Braswell kind of gets overlooked. He's 6'3", 257, so a little bit on the lighter side. He did play in 14 games this last season, 42 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, and 8 sacks. So definitely someone who, once he gets on the NFL regiment, weight room, he could pack on a few more pounds and probably be a disruptive force as a defensive end two on a team. And it's kind of a role that he was used to playing as a number 2 on a lot of teams, or on teams in Alabama. So nothing new for him there. So
yeah, good speed there. I like him as a stand-up. I don't know if you watched him much when he had a hand down. He just kind of like hops up and then he gets going. But I do like him as like a stand-up, coming off the edge and utilizing that speed.
Do you see him being like a nice 3-4 outside linebacker, maybe making that transition once he gets to the NFL?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's got the 3-4 outside linebacker kind of size to him right now. But yeah, with that speed, I would think I would rather see him kind of lined out further, like 7 and 9 tech stuff versus like 5, or some he can reduce inside and play like 4 right over the tackle, but I don't necessarily think that's his best look.
And that's a great thing to kind of wrap around and repeat again. Like we said, like a lot of these players getting drafted, it's really important to where they get drafted and how they get utilized on their NFL team. Like a player might be a defensive end in college, but maybe, at 253 is not big enough to play, that defensive end position. So they're going to utilize him as a 3-4 outside linebacker. And so if he gets recategorized, as a outside linebacker eligible, that might change his value, same vice versa. If they play outside linebacker in college and they get eligibility at defensive end, that increases their value, in some ways. So just kind of something to kind of keep in mind as the draft approaches with that. So Jason, we made our way halfway through our draft. We're at pick 12, just about to start the second round. Kind of looking back at the first round, is there someone that you see as a really good value? And if having to do the draft over again, someone who might move up your board a little bit to make sure you get in your draft?
Well, I'll say, like, it's hard not to have a little Dallas Turner envy when you pass on him, and then he goes to the next pick. So I could say, like, maybe Dallas Turner should be the one, although I think it's arguable. The other thing I'll say is, like, I have like a pretty big tear drop after those first five guys that came off the board for us. So the two linebackers, Cooper and Wilson, and then three edges, Turner, Verse, and Lay2. So um, that's kind of my teardrop. And then the other thing I will say is, like, if it's DT premium, Murphy, and then another guy we'll get to in a little bit are guys that can really kind of go up a draft board if you're in one of those leagues.
And you kind of alluded to this already, kind of in your response, but a lot of mock drafts right now have this draft being really offensive heavy between wide receivers, especially quarterbacks. Does this draft have a lot of elite defensive players in your opinion, or is this kind of a down year for IDP players and prospects?
I mean, I think it is a little bit of a down year. If you compare it to last year, I think we got some elite level IDPs out of it with Will Anderson on the edge. You had a couple of tackles with Jalen Carter, and then Kalijah Cansey, and then you had Jack Campbell at linebacker. I don't necessarily think any of these guys are going to hit kind of that elite level tier within your positional rankings. So I see it as a little bit down. No big knock on any of these guys. I just don't necessarily think we're quite at the level with some of the IDPs we've seen in recent years.
I couldn't agree more. So if I was taking my approach to my draft, I want to make sure that I hit one of those top five guys, in your opinion, between the two linebackers or the three defensive ends, and then maybe kind of fade the other positions and maybe stockpile some of the offensive pieces in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Right now, we could get through draft weekend, and that in our minds could change quite a bit. But yeah, right now, that's I'm stocking up on. I mean, I'm typically doing that anyway. But yeah, for sure, I'm stocking up on offensive guys, especially in this draft class where you've got just such great depth at receiver. It's a good time to snatch up those guys and build your depth there.
All right. Well, let's get back to the second half of this draft here. We'll probably go a little faster through some of these picks just because they're the second tier of picks. But you had kind of mentioned it teased out a little defensive tackle love, and number 13 pick, you are back on the clock, sir.
Yep, and going back to DT, so we'll take Johnny Newton, the tackle out of Illinois. He had foot surgery in January, so he didn't test at the combine, but still like 6'1", 304. Arms are a little bit shorter for a tackle. But yeah, just really strong hands, kind of like Lay2 on the edge. Really fast hands, just never stops coming. I can't imagine being a guard or a tackle and trying to block that guy. He does a really good job of staying low, winning the leverage game. I watched him right after Murphy, and that tainted my view of him, but he's a little slow getting out of his stance. He makes up for it in other ways, but doesn't explode out of his stance like Murphy, which is why I have him one tackle higher. But yeah, really good pass rusher. He's going to be a really good 3-tech at the NFL level.
Yeah, another one of those Big Ten guys. Hated to watch the Badgers go up against, but going to have that in any conference that you're in. So speaking of staying in conference, I guess I'm gonna stay in conference and go with a little golden gopher here. I'm gonna go with the number 14 pick. I'm gonna go with Tyler Nubin, safety out of Minnesota. I think he's the number one safety in this draft. If anybody watched the shows last year, I just had a huge man crush on Brown, Sidney Brown out of Illinois. He just was a great safety. Unfortunately, he got hurt. So hopefully this year he can get back on the field and do what I think he can do. But this year, I think Nubin is going to be just as good or as high as Brown for me. Just really downhill player, 53 tackles, 5 interceptions, really smooth in drills. He didn't run the 40, but just really loose hips and can spin and flip. He was overall number one safety, according to PFF, with an overall grade of 89.2. So if I'm drafting a safety and DeJean is listed as a cornerback, it's going to be Nubin is going to be my number one guy. So
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think he probably would have been a pretty high pick. He would have been an early day 2 pick last year if he came out. So I think he's probably right in that area again this year. Let's see, pick 15. I'm going to go back to linebacker, and as an NC State fan, it pains me to do it, but I'm going to take Cedric Gray out of North Carolina. He's 6'1", 234. Got really good size there. Good arm length at 32.5 inches. Great numbers in the 40, 4.64, 159, 10-yard split. So he's showed his speed when he tested. Really strong vertical jump at 35.5 inches. And that shows, I mean, like he's good at like dropping into coverage and then jumping up, picking off passes. That's a strength of his. So, can excel in a big play way there for us in IDP. Also, really good tackler. Does a good job keeping himself clean, working downhill, getting into the backfield, whether he's defending the run or coming on a blitz. Hate to take a UNC guy here, but I'm going to do it. So we'll go with Cedric Gray.
This is a safe space, so I'm glad that you're doing that. So this is good. I'm going to continue the defensive end run here. There's a lot of talent here. I think there's a lot of pieces that can potentially be some solid NFL players someday. I'm going to go with Brandon Fisk, defensive end out of Florida State. You had mentioned him a little earlier about just having a great combine. He had an awesome Senior Bowl. He ran a 4.7 40, so he's fast enough. He's a huge man, 6'5", 292, and to be able to move like that, I think he's definitely helped his draft status. Maybe can kind of be that 3 technique guy where he can kind of move and be a little bit interchangeable along the defensive line. So I know you liked him after the combine, so I'm gonna snatch him up here at pick 16.
All right. I will come back at 17 and go back to linebacker again. I'm going to take Tommy Eichenberg. 6'2", 233. We didn't get runs at the combine, but his jumps were just kind of okay. I didn't see this coming, but he really did well in the short shuttle. He ran a 4.24. I saw, so that was pretty surprising. But I like him a good bit. He's guy that's always around the ball. Does a good job shedding blockers, not getting closed out of plays. He's a physical guy. He looks really sturdy. He plays like it. He's a high effort guy. Don't want him dropping. Don't like watching him drop into coverage. He's kind of limited athletically in space. So you're going to kind of need to position him pre-snap if you want to get him back in zone. But he's fine when he can do that. He's good at making plays in the backfield. He had 11.5 TFLs in 2022, 20.5 tackles for loss in his career. There's probably a chance that he's only a 2-down linebacker, but I'll take a chance that maybe he gets picked up by somebody that will keep him in all 3 downs.
That's a great pick at this point in the draft, too. Somehow those Ohio State linebackers always find their way on the team, so... All right, I'm going to go to pick 18, a player who had a fantastic combine. With that guy, Keon Mitchell out of Toledo. If you play in a league that's a cornerback required league, he's definitely going to be someone that's going to be on your radar. 6 foot, so he's got the height and the length, 195. He's going to be a stout runner, stout in run support, so he's going to be somebody that can do that. 13 games this season. He had 41 tackles, 18 pass defenses, only 1 interception. Ran really fast, 4.3 40, so he's definitely going to have the speed and the size to keep up with NFL wide receivers. Really good in press coverage, so he's not going to be somebody that's going to be intimidated and pushed around. And he had the number 1 overall grade for PFF according to among all cornerbacks with 91.5. So yeah, cornerback required leagues, he's definitely going to be someone that's going to be on your radar. And if you do play in those leagues, he's probably going to find his way towards the first half of the second round, or maybe sneak into the back end of the first round for you. So
yeah, gosh, he was so good at the Senior Bowl leading up to the game. So I like that pick. I'll stay with the defensive back. I'm going to go with Jaden Hicks here at pick 19, safety out of Washington State. shade over 6'1", 211, so he's got good size. I hate that he didn't run at the combine, but watching him, he looks like he can cover ground. He's pretty good in open field. I remember watching the Washington game. He just came downhill, chased down a reverse for a tackle for loss. Good job as a physical safety. He's kind of got that middle of the field enforcer attitude about him. He can play man at times. He had a great interception against Washington where he just kept up with the receiver running down the field, didn't get stacked, so and was able to come away with the pick. I think he's pretty good in run support. Had a 37.5-inch vertical at the combine, so that shows that explosion that he has.
Yeah, one thing to really like about Hicks too is he is a true box safety. Like he played a majority of his snaps, over 60% of them in the box, so he's not going to be moving anywhere, whether he's in the slot, in that strong safety spot. So definitely want those kind of guys for tackle opportunities. So, all right, on to the 20s. Pick 20. I'm going to go ahead and take another defensive end, Chris Jenkins out of Michigan, another defensive end. I think he's just a player, to kind of a prospect guy to take a stab at this point in the draft. Improved every year in his 4 years at Michigan. He redshirted, played his 3 years. Then he's also just kind of like improved not only in overall defensive rankings, but just in all areas. This last season, a real true leader on that defensive end position for Jim Harbaugh's Wolverines. And at the back half of the second round here, this is a great spot to take a player like this. Like you use the taxi squad spot earlier, this is definitely a player that I'm going to do that with. So,
yeah, if I remember right, he was number one on Bruce Feldman's freaks list because of some of the weight he can throw around. So, yeah, hopefully we can see him develop at the next level.
He's not the biggest guy either at 6'3", 280. So he's definitely not like one of the bigger guys in this draft. But like you said, he's country strong, as they would say.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right, we'll come in at 21 with a guy that was really productive in college, and that's Braylon Trice of Washington. I don't know what happened. I saw him listed at 270 in college, and he kind of looked like it, and then he weighed in at like 245. I'm assuming so he could run a faster 40, but that's a lot of weight to drop. Or maybe Washington just like seriously inflated his weight. I don't know, but he looks on the field a lot more like a 270-pound guy than a 245-pound edge. But I think most people are probably pretty familiar with him and his production. He's made a lot of starts there at Washington. High effort guy. He plays with a lot of power, really powerful hands. I've seen him. He can get tackles to overset, and he'll work back inside. Does a really good job as the looper on stunts. Not really a bendy guy, so that kind of limits his upside. I don't think he's going to be a big-time sack guy for us in fantasy. But if he gets a 3-down roll, I think he can contribute with tackle numbers and occasionally get us that big play we're looking for. So probably more of a IDP depth guy here toward the end of the second round.
Yeah, and these are great names to be putting on your radar as you're looking for guys to stash back end. Maybe after the draft is over, go ahead and stash them on your practice squad and pick them up off of waivers. So, all right, moving on to pick number 22. I'm going to go ahead and select Cameron Kitchens, safety out of Miami. Again, just another one of those really high-profile schools that always seems to turn out the position. In 10 games this season, he had 59 tackles. He had a sack. He ran a 4.6 40. He looked a little stiff running the drills this past weekend, so maybe that's something that he'll work on the next level. Probably going to be a day 2 at best prospect, probably day 3 prospect. But definitely someone to kind of keep on your radar. Really hard hitter, 5'11", 206, so he's a little smaller on the size, but definitely someone who can lay the lumber. He's plays very physical for his size. So,
all right, pick 23. I'm going to go off the reservation a little bit here, and go back to the Senior Bowl and grab Nathaniel Watson, the linebacker out of Mississippi State. He's got good length. He's 6'2", 233, 32.5-inch arms. Good speed. Tested with a 4.63 40, 159, 10-yard split. His jumps were not great, and that really dragged down that RAS. And then he didn't do the agility drills. But just watching him, he's got good range in the open field, does a good job moving, keeping blockers off of him, works downhill well. He's a really good tackler. Like I said, watched him at the Senior Bowl. He also got a pick in the Senior Bowl, like Cedric Gray. Did a good job kind of dropping in the zone. Just always around the ball. And, we're kind of toward the end of the second round. Most dynasty players, at least, don't really care for the older guys. And he played 6 years at Mississippi. He was 6 years at Mississippi State. So that's 6 years in the SEC. He's a really experienced player. I don't think he's going to get drafted in a position where he's going to come in and immediately start for a team, but I can see him getting on the field and then, being one of those guys that sticks as a starter a lot longer than anybody expects him to.
Well, we saw a lot of guys undrafted last year. Ivan Pace, for example, went undrafted and, went on to have a very good, very productive season for the Vikings this last year. So totally a name to kind of put on your radar. So, all right, last pick of the draft. I'm going to go with a cornerback, Teron Arnold out of Alabama. Probably a better player than his teammate, Kool-Aid McKinstry. Played 14 games, 63 tackles, so he's definitely great in run support. He had 5 interceptions, very, very smooth hips. He's got a great hip flip, and so he's definitely going to be able to stay in and out of his breaks. Keeps his eyes in the backfield. That's what makes him such a great tackler. He ran a 4.5 40, so he's got the speed to keep up. He's 6 foot 195, so he's definitely going to be a force on Sundays. He also led all of college. Yeah, actually led all of college corners in PFF grades in run support. So he's definitely going to be somebody who not only is going to get you past defenses, but he's also going to be someone who's going to rack up that tackle column for you too. So, all right. Well, that is our 12 rounds of our 12 picks of our second round. So, Jason, as you're looking through our 24 players that we selected today, who do you feel was a really good value where they were selected today, and maybe somebody to kind of keep our eye on as a mover up the draft boards as we get closer to draft season?
Yeah, I hate to go with somebody that I picked, but Braylon Trice there at 21, seems like a really good value. I'm still trying to figure out that weight. I'll have to dig into that and really kind of see where that's coming from. I'd like to see what hopefully somebody asked him that question in an interview. But yeah, he's just such a productive guy. That could be a real value in the second round here.
Is there a player, Jason, that wasn't selected in our top 24 that still kind of intrigues you or maybe surprised you that wasn't drafted? All right, I'll mention 2 guys here. Perfect.
Yeah. First guy, I'm not surprised he didn't get drafted, but a really intriguing guy. And if you're in leagues and you've got like a lot of taxi squad spots, Austin Booker, edge out of Kansas. He needs to add muscle. He's like 6'4", 240, nice long arms, 34 inches on the arm length. Let's see, didn't have a lot of college experience. So yeah, stats aren't going to blow you away, but he's really explosive. If anybody hasn't watched him yet, I'd try to find some clips of him. He's got a really explosive first step. He can bend. He's really quick. He can get tackles to overset and then cut back inside. So he's just kind of an intriguing guy. I would love to grab him in the third round and just throw him on if it's an IDP only draft, which very few people are in. But then just kind of throw him on a taxi squad and see if he can develop. And then the second guy I'll mention, most people probably know this guy, Javon Bullard, safety out of Georgia. He's not like a huge guy, but you see sometimes guys just like they read stuff quick and then they just shoot downhill when they see it. And he's kind of that guy where he just gets he's just shot out of a cannon. when he's coming downhill. He sees things so quick. But he's got versatility to play the slot. He's a good blitzer when he's up at the line of scrimmage. So he's just a really good player. I'm a big fan of his.
And Georgia knows a thing or two about turning out NFL players. So they totally agree with him. Yeah, Bullard had 81 tackles last year and 3 sacks, so he's definitely a player that's at the line of scrimmage, and he played a majority of his snaps in the box as well. So he's definitely an intriguing prospect and someone who probably should have made the top 24 for sure. So, but all right. Well, Jason, that'll just wrap up our episode tonight. What are you currently working on, and where can all the good folks find more of your stuff?
Yep. I do write for the IDP show. So I've got a couple of free agency previews that's coming up very soon. So you can get team by team blows for the edge rushers and the interior defensive line guys. That's over on the IDP show. And then also write for Dynasty League Football. And right now I'm closing out the 2023 Rookie Review Series. So over on DLF, you can find, started out with the interior guys, and then did a couple of articles on the edge guys, and then recently the linebacker review got posted. So I try to go pretty deep and really kind of pick out anybody that looks like they may have an inkling of fantasy value going forward. Working on the safeties now.
I'm sorry, Jason, what?
Working on the safeties now. So that I don't do a cornerback review just because it's corners are kind of tough in dynasty leagues. They don't necessarily hold their value, but safety should hopefully be up by next weekend.
Well, we won't tell Johnny the Greek that. We'll just let that stay between us. So
if you want quarterback advice, there's one man to go to.
He is definitely that. So. Well, that'll about do it for this episode. And next time, I will be talking free agency, actually, with Kyle Bellafuel, and I will be looking at some of the defensive players that you might want to take a look at before the start of the NFL free agency, which is quickly approaching, as some of these players might see a significant bump in their value. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe to YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast so you never miss an episode. Once again, I'd like to thank Jason for coming here tonight, and I'd like to thank each of you for listening to this episode. I look forward to catching up with you next time on the IDP After Show.
This was the IDP After Show.